Juz 26 starts with Ahqaf that opens with Hamim, followed by a reference to the Quran before presenting a question to the idol worshipper. Those that you call God, show me what part of earth they have created. To persuade the stubborn disbeliever further, the surah makes a quick reference to the ones from Bani Israel who accepted the Quran as true guidance when they found out that the Quran in fact confirms the Torah. Verse 12. Regardless, man continues to make his choice. Verse 15 onwards, the surah talks about both the upright and the deviant human nature, mentions the fate of the past communities, taking us to the end of the surah where we find a reference to a group of jinns who were directed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to listen to the Quran. 31 to 32. The surah concludes in verse 35 with the promise of a day when life spent on this earth will seem no more than an hour in a single day. Muhammad opens declaring war by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against his enemies who are hostile to his faith, followed by a command to the believers to defend their faith. Verse 4 to 9. Followed by this command is a reference to the hypocrite, describing their conduct while they are with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in 16. Their hesitation and panic when they are commanded to fight. Verse 20. Then finally talking about them conspiring with the Yahud against the Muslims in Medina. Verse 25 to 26. 29 to 31 is the threat to expose their true self to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Muslims of Medina. The final passage invites the believers to carry on to defend their faith while being ready to sacrifice in his path, and also instructing the believer to remain firm. If you turn away, he will bring other people in place of you, and they will not be like you. Verse 38. Fatah opens giving the Prophet the great news of the conquest of Mecca, and then also promising the believers forgiveness of sins, reward, and divine help. Verse 1 to 5. By contrast, verse 6 mentions the fate of the hypocrites and the disbelievers. Verse 8 to 10 speaks of the pledge the believers gave to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the time of Hudaybiyah. Within the same context, the surah in 11 to 16 mentions the desert Arabs who stayed behind without an excuse. The surah exposes their true thoughts. The surah also talks about those who had genuine excuses to stay behind. No blame is to the blind or the lame or the sick. Verse 17. 18 to 28 speaks about the details that led to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, concluding the surah with an outline highlighting the rank of the companions, talking of their firmness, mercy, worship, how their faces bear the marks of prostration, and finally Allah's promise of forgiveness for their sins and great reward. Verse 29. Hujurat 1 to 5 speaks of the manners Muslims must observe with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. 6 to 10 describes the dealings of the Muslims with one another. 11 to 13 advise to the Muslims to remain united and stay away from activities that lead to corruption and disunity. Finally, 14 to 18 talking of the Bedouins, the desert Arabs who had submitted, yet faith had not found its roots in their hearts.
من أجبت دعاء نوح فانتصر وحملته في فلكك المشحون يا من أحال النار حول خليله روحا وريحانا